Good evening, Hampstead Garden Suburb. Welcome to the second installment in our mental health series. Tonight's edition deals with parenting during the COVID-19 crisis. I'm joined tonight by Christine Calland, a children's behavior consultant with over 25 years experience working with children, schools, and families. Originally a teacher, she spent many years working for Bristol Local Authority as a specialist advisor on children's behavior and mental health before creating her independent consultancy, Not Just Behavior, in 2007. Chris works in schools, universities, and businesses and trains nationally on all aspects of behavior management and children's mental health. She also supports families, provides individual consultations, and runs parenting groups and seminars. Chris speaks regularly at national conferences and appears frequently in the media discussing children's mental health and the importance of developing emotional resilience to the pressures of our modern culture. She has a particular interest in children's body image and self-esteem and co-authored the award-winning book, Body Image in the Primary School. And last year, her new book, Minnie and Max Are Okay. This is a story for children aged 3 to 5 and aims to build their self-esteem and body confidence as early as possible. She works internationally to promote the importance of children's self-esteem and body confidence and advises the government on children's body image. She's a passionate campaigner and appears frequently in the media discussing children's behavior, parenting matters, and mental health and well-being. In 2012, she received a parliamentary award in recognition of her work. Chris is a parent herself and lives in the Southwest. Chris Calland, welcome to Hampstead Garden Suburb Synagogue, and please help us help our children through the current corona crisis.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What an intro. I think the most important bit of that is that I'm a parent myself, and I am in the process of having my own children who are 20 now and 23, and also one of the boyfriends is here. So we're all going through our own lockdown issues ourselves, and I'm really welcoming you tonight to the session, and I hope that you find it really helpful. I'll just talk you through what I'm planning. I'm hoping to speak for about half an hour. Look at a number of different things, think about how we talk to our children about what's going on at different ages, thinking about how you can work from home and try and balance helping children manage a bit of home education and how we cope with being in the space together. And I'm going to think with you a little bit about how we dial down stress and support our own and our children's mental health through this difficult time. At the end of the half hour, obviously very open to questions. Already I have a few questions that have been sent through, so we can talk about those. But if you have anything that comes up that isn't addressed through the talk, really, feel free to either write them down or just say them through Rabbi Friedman, and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay, so it's just me. I haven't got a PowerPoint. And the downside of that is that I've had to have a shower and iron a shirt. Ironing is one of the things I've cut out as my helping my own mental health. And I think it's worth saying that part of this is really worth thinking about, that the world has changed for all of us. And I know you had a session last week that I heard was fantastic, all about how you look after yourself and your own mental health. But I just wanted to touch on that briefly, because I think acceptance is really key to all of this, accepting that we now have a new normal, and that we have to expect a little bit less of ourselves. And for me, that was ironing. So, really acknowledging that this will pass and that we will get to a point where there will be a normality, but that there's a process to go through. And acceptance is a really key part of allowing ourselves to let go of the expectations that we have on ourselves and on our children. And I think that's a key foundation stone, if you like, to remember as we go through this. So I want to start by talking a little bit about how we communicate with our children about what is going on at the moment. Of course, as a parent, one of the things we want to do is to protect our children. There's lots of things that happen in the world that we if our children are young, we don't have to talk to them about. But actually, something is happening now which is impacting on all of their lives. If they're school age or nursery age, they will immediately, not be having the same routines that they have had in the past, and that's going to be difficult and challenging for them. Some children will absolutely love it. Others will find it really difficult to shift that pattern and that routine. So the first thing I think it's really important to say is that we're bombarded with these images all the time through our media outlets. We're going to be having an awful lot of news coming through the radio, through our internet, through the television. Our children will be hearing us or others discussing this. And so it's not something that we can totally avoid, even with little ones. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about how to communicate about what's happening, and not avoid the subject entirely, particularly for little ones. I think it's holding that balance, isn't it, between addressing the worries, but also being reassuring. Our job as a parent is to, I kind of imagine them like balloons with helium in them, and our job is to kind of pin them down so they've got a base, an anchor, and they can bob about, but we're holding them down and they can feel secure and safe with us. First of all, find out what they know. So don't assume knowledge. Ask them, you may have heard about this, and there's illness that's going around, and that's why we're all staying in, and I wonder what you've heard. So start with where they're at, rather than just kind of going in with telling them all about it. Be honest when you can, but it's listening first, and then be honest and answer their questions, but don't answer, don't go off into lots of detail that you don't need to go into. Particularly, I'm thinking for younger children at the moment, and be brief. I think the key thing is to acknowledge the feelings around it and to normalize those feelings. So, I know, yes, it can feel a bit scary. That's okay. Lots of children feel a bit scared about that. Lots of us feel a little bit scared, but that's okay. And just recognizing what feelings they have. They may not have scared feelings. They might be absolutely loving it. They might be excited about the changes. But normalizing any feeling, always accepting the feeling. Any feeling is always okay. And normalizing that is really important. Oh, lots of children ask that question. Lots of people ask that question. Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm really glad you've come to me and asked. So giving them the message that you are there to talk to them, you're there to answer questions, and it's okay not to know the answer. So sometimes you might have to say, yeah, that's, I've been wondering that. We don't know the answer, but that's okay. Other people are trying to find out for us, and other people are looking into that. There's a really brilliant little social story, actually, that's been doing the rounds, which I'll send to Carolyn, that she might be able to send out to you. That's a really nice, simple way of explaining it to children that you might find helpful. Keep it simple, keep it clear, and honest. And really what we're doing, the message is, it'll be okay. I'm not panicking about this. We as a family are all right together, because actually what the children pick up on is your anxiety and what's happening around them. So dialing down all the media bombardment, taking that off the table, being aware of what they're hearing, the little ones particularly, what they hear you saying to each other in phone calls or on Zoom conversations, and taking some of that media out of the equation for some of our little ones, so they're not constantly bombarded with it, because they do pick up on our feelings of anxiety and stress, and it's that makes them feel worried and wobbly. So let's have a think about, I'll give you some examples of the sorts of difficult questions you might have to answer, some really practical things. So the sorts of things might be, are we all going to die? That's the sort of things children will ask. And you can just be very honest that no, most people are going to be okay. Just give them a very simple, very clear answer. Is grandma going to die? Because they might have picked up that older people are more at risk, and giving the message that grandma's looking after herself, and we're all staying in so that older people are safe. With teenagers, you'll get the message of, actually, I'm well, my mates are well, why can't I go out? You've got all of that going on. And I think we're giving them the message that I'm recognizing that feeling. I really feel for teenagers. I think it's so tough for them at the moment that just as they're wanting to pull away, we're pulling them back in. So being able to say to them, look, I know it's tough. I know it's really difficult. I know you want to hang out with your friends, but we're a community and we're supporting our community, and that's the deal. It will end, but that's what we're having to do at the moment, that acceptance thing. And what's going to happen, when will it end? We don't know the answer to all of those things. and we're finding out together. So it's okay to say, I'm not really sure, but we're okay. We're okay in our house, and we'll find ways to manage putting things in that are just short term. So we know what we're doing this week, and we don't need to know yet what we're doing next week. And that's certainly true for little children who really need that. So I think that kind of clarity is really helpful. With little ones, look at Newsround as well. Newsround's a great way of helping little children understand what's going on at their own level, at the sort of tweeny primary age kids. It's a really good media outlet for you to access. I wanted to talk briefly as well about working from home and balancing that work and child education, the home education stuff that we've got going on. And I guess it's worth thinking about how you manage that. And I know all of you will be in different situations. For some of you, you're trying to, you might be on your own, or you're trying to balance working a full day. And clearly that's going to be incredibly difficult if you've got little ones. So I think setting yourself a realistic timetable, having a workspace, if you are lucky enough to have an office or an area in your house that you can put aside for your workspace. It may be that you need to be realistic about what you can fit in a day. It's not a normal working from home scenario. You are in a crisis, and I think it's worth clocking that for us. We're not just working from home. We're working from home during a pandemic, dealing with a crisis, a worldwide crisis. And I think allowing yourself that recognition and letting that go a little bit, and being clear and communicating with your employer about actually what you have capacity to do, and then thinking of your own little timetable of when you can do that, scheduling breaks, keeping connected to people, and being part of a solution with your employer, rather than feeling like, I've got to do as much as I would always normally do. I've got to be seen to do it just as I would have done in the office. I think being able to be part of the solution, so contacting them and saying, look, this is what I can do. These are the hours I'm able to do, given that I'm also managing homeschooling and all the rest of it. So providing them with a sort of solution rather than just feeling worried about a problem. I think in terms of our children, we're in this position now where many of us are working from home and are having to be teachers, having to be managing their education. And you'll have a whole range of different ages of children. There'll be some who are really little and aren't, just playing. And actually, that's really, really important. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. And then you'll have your teenagers who, might have been waiting to do exams, and suddenly that's been taken off the table after years of waiting for that moment of doing your exam and working towards it. That's suddenly gone. And that's really caused a lot of stress for a lot of our young people. Or you might have a university student like I have, who's come back, hasn't quite finished their first year or their second year, or, they might still be struggling with work at home and not having the support that they need. So all of you are in different situations, and I'll try and address overall some of those issues that I think will help children feel as secure and as safe and as stable as they can. I think the first thing to say is to recognize that you may be a teacher, but my guess is most of you are not teachers, and that you cannot replicate school in the way that school was. So kind of allow yourself to let that go a little bit. It's not going to have to be a 6-hour day and an hour off for lunch and all of that kind of stuff. If you've got a little child, if you've got somebody who's early years going, reception, nursery reception, year 1, year 2, those kind of really young children, really, I think the recognition that play is how they learn best, and that play is not instead of learning, it is learning. So allowing as much of that as possible. And actually, so many teachers are so frustrated by the fact that they haven't got enough time for that creative play, which actually is the way that they learn how to socialize, how to work through their own issues. It would be really important at the moment, if you've got little ones at home, to let them do as much creative play as possible. So using little Lego figures and Playmobil figures, they're brilliant for children working through what's happening for them. That's how they manage and process their lives. So just noticing that with them. It's really good if you've got, thinking for little ones here, if you've got helpers, like little figures who are nurses or firemen or police people or fire people, and you can notice when they're playing with them and say, oh, maybe we can get the helpers in. So you're giving a message that there's lots of people out there who help us and look after us, and we are safe because we have those people looking after us. So that's a really nice way of encouraging children to process what's happening for themselves. Use puppets and dolls and toys and teddies and those kind of things, really important for little children. So as much play as possible. Put some structure into the day if you can, even for those little ones. I mean, structure is really important. But as you get as children get older, I guess you'll need to do a little bit more in terms of more academic learning. But don't worry too much about having to do lots of academic learning, lots of worksheet-based stuff. I was talking to a teacher the other day, and we were saying how actually, as long as children are mentally well, you can catch up with all the other stuff. Much more important for them to feel okay and safe and secure with you, and to be able to use this time in a positive way if possible, than that you're kind of standing over them, forcing them to do worksheets after worksheet and trying to kind of keep them up with the level of work that you might be getting from a school. Teachers can catch them up really quickly. However, if you've got a child who becomes a bit traumatized, or their mental health really suffers, that's a much more long-term thing. So really prioritizing that over the idea that we have lots and lots of academic work to be doing. I would create a simple structure, regular breaks in the day, any kind of learning time sort of in the morning, and other stuff in the afternoon. It's quite nice, a few little tips. So things like having a pot with activities in the pot, so you can have a play activities, you can have learning activities, and children get up in the morning and take out something from the pot. So I'm doing a bit of maths for 10 minutes, or I'm going to write a story, so they pick it out, and it's sort of exciting. They don't quite know what they're going to have, so a sort of lucky dip, if you like, of activities. So sitting with them and making a list and ripping them up and putting them in the pot, so every morning they get up, or you might do it the night before, so when they take it out, you've got a little timetable ready, so when they wake up in the morning, they know what they're going to do. That level of certainty can really help children feel secure. That sort of little visual timetable of what the plan is for the day, and putting in things like, on a Friday we always have, we always go on a bike ride, or on a Saturday we have pancakes in the morning, or those nice little things within the routine, really key. Use resources online. BBC Bite Size is brilliant, and they're putting more and more things on all the time to help you. But also let them, make dens, go in the garden if you're lucky enough to have a garden, do a bug hunt, make an obstacle course, finding nice little activities that are more play-based. That's all about learning. But get them into the habit of understanding that is learning. So, when you sit around the table at night saying, well, what have you learned today? What do you now know that you didn't know this morning? And it could be that I've learned how to be a really good den maker. I've learned how to do, it doesn't have to always be the sort of academic stuff, because actually that's still learning, and really important learning. Sitting around with the family and playing games and doing board games, really important. So it's a simple structure, taking off the pressure a little bit around it, limiting it to any kind of just formal type learning to the mornings if you can, and do what they can manage. If you find that your child is getting difficult, stop, and have that discussion with them, particularly as they're the ones who are getting older, and say, this isn't working. How are we going to manage it, so that they become part of the process of planning, so that they are engaged with it and have some agency. Notice how they're behaving and how they're responding, and if it's becoming difficult and they are getting stressed, then it's not working and it needs to change. And I think sometimes just letting go of that idea that well, you have to have a school day, and then that's not as important as their mental health. And it's learning, but it's learning in a different way. So and actually what they're learning are life skills. I certainly think, as here we are as a family in lockdown, any child from the age of about 4 upwards would sit around, write a list of all the jobs that have to be done in the house, and people take on chores. I think that's a really good, important learning for children about how we work as a team, having some responsibility. It's really good for self-esteem. So that's as I say, it's not instead of learning, it is learning, and it's a different way of learning, and it's helpful for children to have those different processes and focuses in their day. I wanted to talk briefly about teenagers, because, as I said, I feel really sorry for teenagers. I think they're having such a difficult time for them. It may be easier for you guys in a way, because as a parent, you're not having to manage them so much. But I think what can happen is teenagers can start to become a little bit more isolated. They find ways to, spend a lot of time online. I know there's some concerns about that, and I'll touch on that in a second. I guess it's thinking about how helping them manage their time, and it's ask, don't tell with teenagers. It's asking them, okay, so this is the situation, how are we going to make it work? What would you like to do within this time that will be helpful to you? These are some things that I think you might need to include, but allow them, again, some control within it to create some, so they're part of the solution rather than being a problem. I think that's really nice to do that. And I guess helping them to engage in learning is important. They might need to do it with friends, keeping in touch with their classmates or their uni mates, and encouraging different ways to stay in contact with friends, because they can become really isolated. And finding opportunities to help them to spend time with you guys as a family, and not sort of accepting, oh, well, they're a teenager, they don't want to sit with us at meal times. Really encouraging that. So finding opportunities for teenagers to do something a bit different. Actually, there's an awful lot of activities out there that teenagers are starting to do, which gives them purpose. They might be doing some exercise classes from their, using their laptop. They might be reorganizing their room and finding ways to, they might be decorating their room, they might be selling clothes, they might be teaching their younger siblings, they might be teaching you, they might have started to learn something else that you're just interested in, and now they've got an opportunity to do it. If they're preparing for university or sixth form, or doing a little bit of prep for that, if they're up for it, finding time to be quite useful within the family. But I would also say, allow them some duvet days. Allow them to get up a bit later. Don't expect them to be up at 9 o'clock on the dot. Have a little bit of negotiation so that they feel they're being understood and listened to. Let them recognize with them that this is really difficult. Recognize how tricky it is, but that you want. Let's think about. It might be that this period will be a time that universities ask us, "Oh, what did you do during the 2020 lockdown?" And you might think of being involved in a charity, or organising something in the community. It sounds like you've got a fantastic community. So what could you do to help those less fortunate? And that might be a really positive, purposeful thing that you could do, connecting up with other friends and do in a safe way. Of course, look out for signs. Look out for signs that your child might be struggling a little bit. You might see a bit of regression from children who seem to be a bit younger, or a bit more. You might see some tearfulness. Look out for just sleep patterns totally changing, or children struggling to sleep. And sometimes you might see stomach issues, or stomach ache, losing appetite, not wanting to eat as much, just starting to get really anxious and eating too much or not eating enough, and just kind of clock that, because those can be real signs. And difficult behavior in children, is they're often showing us their anxiety rather than telling us. They're not using their words, they're just showing us through what they're, I don't like articulating it, but they're showing us through what they do. So children don't talk to you about what they're feeling because they don't want to worry you, but you might see it in some of their behaviors. And I'm going to talk just slightly in a minute about behavior, but I just wanted to touch on the sorts of things you might do for anxiety generally. Sleep, of course, is absolutely key. So if children are not having enough sleep, we need to look at the sleep patterns and the routines and what you can put in there. And it may be that teenagers are sleeping later and going to bed a bit later. Okay, but just acknowledging that with them and saying, oh, that's okay, you're going to bed a bit later, you're getting up later, so just shift the day if you can, rather than getting into a big argument about them having to go to bed early. And much better to allow them that time to have that sleep time. With screen time, I guess screen time is a tricky one, because there will be a lot of you out there who are really struggling with this, and I recognize that. Screen time isn't bad per se. There's lots of great things that children and young people and we do on screens, and sort of welcoming that and recognizing that and asking them about it and what they're doing. And actually for our teenagers, it's their way of connecting with their friends, and that is important for their mental health. So it may be that you find you're giving way a little bit more and allowing more screen time than you would normally, but that this is an unusual situation, and acknowledging that with them and clocking it with them, noticing. So what we're doing is we are allowing you because we see that that's important. Giving them the message that for now that's all right. Yeah, but that will change again once things are in a new normal. But also noticing with them how much time they're spending and having alternatives through the day. So there are certain things that you would want them to be doing. They're taking on some jobs within the house. They might be cooking on a Wednesday. They've got to do some housework, around the place. They might be helping with the littler ones. They've got to walk the dog and do a bit of exercise. So they've got alternatives as well as their screen time. I think with little ones, encouraging that sort of quite creative play, as we were talking about the Lego and those kind of things, but also colouring and drawing and art activities, really important. With the really little ones, it's really hard for them. They're not seeing grandparents, they're not seeing people they would normally see. Some little children really struggle with not being able to cuddle, and they feel quite bereft that they've lost that, as we all do actually. I was talking to a little family the other day, and their child was really struggling that she could see grandma through the window, but she couldn't cuddle her. So we picked out a bear. We talked about picking out a bear, one of her cuddly toys, and that became Cuddle Bear, and she was allowed to cuddle Bear when she wanted to cuddle grandma, and she carried Cuddle Bear around with her and just needed that little bit of comfort. So finding those kind of things, getting outside as much as possible, of course, listening to music, looking after something, a dog, a pet, or a plant, planting something and watching it grow, nurturing it. All of those things are really helpful for mental health. It is important to have some kind of level of routine. Some children need it more than others. If you've got a child who's on the spectrum, or is really struggling and particularly anxious, that certainty of a visual little timetable can really help, and setting that the night before so that when they wake up, what they're doing. That's really helpful. And meals around the table together, where we share what we've learned in the day, fun things we've done, bringing some fun into it, lots of music, mindful activities, really, really important. And again, those kind of nice routines that we're always looking forward to. So we've got, in our house we have poker night on a Friday and pancakes on a Saturday, and we do a quiz on the Wednesday. So those kind of little routines that you kind of clock into your calendar and write in, really, really important. And I guess it's worth sort of saying, we talked about communication, but listening is going to be the most important thing. Being available, listening, keeping communication open. And it's tempting when children tell us something. What we tend to do is we do that whole minimizing thing. Oh, it's fine. Oh, don't worry. Or we try and rescue. Right, what can I do to help? And that comes from a good place. But actually, a really good approach is to say, to recognize the feeling. So to hear what they're telling you and to notice with them. That sounds really difficult. that sounds like you're feeling a little bit left out, or you're feeling anxious, or you notice the feeling. Am I right? Is that about right? Check in with them and find as many opportunities as you can to have those conversations. Or talk is always good. Thank you for coming. Now, it may be that you're working and they turn up at the worst possible time and you're on the phone to the boss, or you've got something else to do. And don't be tempted to go, yeah. Actually say, I want to talk about this. Let's book it in. So we've got a time tonight, or special bubble time where we always sit together and do a story. I'm going to remember that you want to talk about this, and I'll talk about it with you then. So you kind of prioritize it, but obviously you can't always be available, but always kind of having a special time that you can talk, and help them tell their story. You might have some children who are struggling with difficult behavior. Just a couple of things I just wanted to say about behavior. It's really tempting to focus on the stuff they're doing wrong. So it can help to have like a behavior of the day, a target. So today I'm really looking for brilliant sharing. That's what I'm looking for today with the siblings, whatever. So every time I see it, I'm going to notice it. I'm going to do a little tick in a box. You might do it that you count up. You've got to get 10 in a day, or you might just count up the ticks. Wow, today you've got 6 ticks. That's fantastic. How did you do that? So you're focusing on the thing they're doing right rather than the thing they're doing wrong. You might do it if there's a little reward, or you might just celebrate the fact that they've done it. So really just giving that positive message. If you see poor behavior, think anxiety rather than naughty. And always be surprised by it. That's not like you're normally so good at being a good friend or helping, or that's not. So you're always kind of surprised by it, and bring them in rather than pushing away. Be wary of sending children to their room or sitting on a naughty step and that kind of thing in this environment where they're already feeling a bit anxious. So thinking of ways to bring them in rather than push away, and always end the day on a nice positive. One thing I noticed about you today was lovely, was how you helped Dad with the stepladder or whatever it is. Just something that you notice, it's really a positive end to the day. And what you're looking forward to tomorrow. Overall, we're kind of aiming to dial down anxiety. It means that it's a different time, so you might just have to let some stuff go. Enjoy the time that you've got with them if you can, because actually you might look back on this time, and I'm sure a lot of the younger children will look back on this time as a real golden time for them, which is kind of a magical sort of bit of time's appeared. So kind of using it in that positive way. Be wary of comparing yourself to the family down the road they seem to be doing lots of essays and doing all their work, and they've made a fantastic cake, and they're already, they've got a photo on Instagram of them doing some wonderful things together. We know that road is really unhelpful for any of us, and often you're only seeing a skewed view, and it isn't reality. So be wary of that. Good enough is good enough. Give yourself a break, I would say. I've talked 3 minutes too long, and I noticed there are lots of messages on the live comments, so I'm open for questions, and I've got a few questions here.
Chris, that was incredibly comprehensive. Thank you so much. You've answered, I think, so many of our questions, questions that have come in advance of this evening's session, and so many tips and pieces of advice that are just practical for each and every one of us in our lives. I'm going to paraphrase a couple of the questions that have come in, and just kind of form them more as questions. So you began by introducing yourself as a parent of essentially young adult children. And the question that I think is being posed here is, if we have adult children who suddenly find themselves caught in a stage of life that they thought were behind them, how do we honor their space and freedom?
Well, I'm totally in that situation myself, and I totally get how difficult that is. And I think all of us will have you might have a child who'd already gone to uni, or actually was just at sixth form, or just has started to spread their wings and go, and here we are having to pull them in. And I know people have spoken to me before about worrying because they're adults. It's very hard. We have not got ultimate control over adults. We cannot order them to stay in. However, I think it's about that agency that you give them. I think the first thing is always recognizing how difficult this is for them. So being able to say to them, you know, I'm so sorry that you're having to go through this. This is so tricky. I recognize this. Acknowledging that it's also true for their friends, that every single one of their friends is also going through the same thing. And so that is alleviating, I think, of some of the stress. Certainly my own children have said that idea that I know everybody else is going through it as well. And, you know, and they're finding ways to connect, helping them think of ways to connect. So finding opportunities. So, you know, there's silly things that have been going on House Party and Zoom, where they're doing dressing up and they're doing a quiz and helping them do that, finding opportunities for them to do it and helping them have that connection with their friends, and recognizing that as important. And asking them, I think it's always about ask, not tell. How can this is the situation we're in. What would help you to make this work? You know, this is the time, you know, we've got a period of time now where we're all kind of together. What would help you? And kind of, here we are as a group of adults sitting around the table. This is what I need. What do you need? Let's kind of negotiate and have a family meeting and agree it. But they have to feel some agency within it. And I do feel for them. I think it's really tough, but everybody's in the same situation. I think ultimately that is helpful for that age group.
Well, thank you. I have to tell you, we probably struggled the first few days until we figured that we can get our young adult child to be almost the homeschool head teacher for some of our younger children, and make sure that everybody is working in tandem.
Yeah, and it's a really good way of learning, isn't it? If you're teaching something, you learn it yourself as well. So if you can teach something, and that's really important.
Absolutely. So again, to paraphrase another one of the common questions that has come in, as parents, do we need to come across as perfect or as human? What's more helpful to our children in terms of their own personal growth?
Well, I don't know any perfect parents, so I think with little ones, the thing that's most important is that we come across as calm and okay, and that we make mistakes. I think it's really important that we tell them we make mistakes, because actually, if we come across as perfect, we never make a mistake. We give the message that that's what we expect of them, and there is no perfect. And actually, that way, anxiety lies, and stress, and the sorts of things that we've seen way before this pandemic, of particularly kind of high achieving girls who feel like, if I haven't got an A star, it's not worthy, you know, it's not worth anything. So we're already seeing perfectionism amongst some of our young people, and that is really unhelpful. So I think we do them a disservice to present ourselves as perfect. Much better to be human, and to make mistakes, and to acknowledge those mistakes and say, oh, I wish I'd done it differently. And also to teach your own methods of coping with your own anxiety. So, you know, just as you're going for a walk, saying to the children that you're with, you know, it really helps me feel calmer when I'm on a walk. You know, when I get a bit stressed, it just makes me feel a little bit better. So you're giving a message that there are ways of helping yourself when you feel stressed. You know, what do you do? You know, this is what I do. What do you do? So you kind of have those dialogues. With little ones, I think when we're talking about all being stuck in the same house together, and all of this fear and anxiety going on around, I think, as I was saying earlier, it's really about helping them feel safe and secure. And that's just about putting in routines and structure and fun and positivity with them as much as possible. Ultimately, human, not perfect.
All right. Well, thank you. Do you have any particular advice for parents sharing children between two homes, as in children of parents living in different homes?
Well, I guess one thing I noticed, I was looking on the Gingerbread website, which is a great website for anybody who's a single parent and managing parenting on their own. And I know that throws up other anxieties and stresses, that you are allowed to switch children across to their alternate parent if there is another parent, so that is allowed within the lockdown, but it may be that you choose not to do that, or there's a vulnerable adult in the other house, and so everybody has their own difficulties. I guess there are two things to say there. One is, if you are the parent who has the children most of the time, you might feel slightly overwhelmed and that you have very little time. And if you are the other parent who maybe isn't getting them as much, you might feel cheated and that you're missing out. I guess going back to what we said right at the beginning about that acceptance, this is the deal for now. I guess that's part of it. I think finding ways to communicate with the other parent. So you would have been with your mum this time, so maybe we could do some cooking and you can have the screen there, and putting in opportunities to connect with the parent is important. And I think just letting that. I mean, I always think it's really important, if you can, to try and be as positive as you can about the other parent. This is the situation we're in. It's not great, but that's what we're doing for now. And I think children always want, in terms of their mental health, children always want to know the certainty and the plan of it. So you are better just to say, okay, you're staying here with me for the next 4 weeks, if that's what the situation is, or you're staying here with me at the weekends and you'll be at your dad's in the week. But be absolutely clear about the plan, because once there's clarity and certainty, that just alleviates anxiety. And if it's that you're not going to be able to see the other parent for 3 weeks, let's think about how you can connect with them and how you can meet up with them online. One of the things with younger children that is really nice to do is to make a little photo book. If you're the parent who doesn't have them, so you make a little photo book and you can send it to them with pictures of you and with them, and say you're looking and plan something for at the end of the lockdown. I'm really looking forward to when we get back together. Let's think about what we can do, and or having a story time regularly every evening, or putting little routines in that still keep you connected. Really important if you can.
Wow, very interesting. I know that when you talk about getting the certainty in their lives, I'm reminded there is a classic Jewish adage that says, "Ein simcha keheter hasfeikas." There is the greatest happiness is the resolution of uncertainty. So, thank you. It is so important to bring certainty into our children's lives. So, you'd spoken earlier about taking our children off their screens, giving them ideas to be productive, but at the same time, knowing that their mental health and well-being is of paramount importance, and therefore not pushing them too much during this already stressful time. How do we strike that balance, and what are the short-term and long-term negative effects of too much screen time that we should be concerned about as parents?
Okay, so that's two things. Let's have a look. Let's think about the education bit at the beginning. I mean, you'll have a whole range of different children that you've got in your head as you're watching this. Some children love learning. They want to sit down and do their phonics, and they're excited to write a story, and they want to do it. And you'll have some children who are really resistant and pulling away. And some children thrive with academic learning, and others just don't find it so easy. And I think you know your child best. I was saying earlier, I think there is some expectation of some learning, but it may be, and the schools have been brilliant. I mean, schools are sending out all sorts of work, but many of the schools, certainly that I know and I work in, are saying, yes, we're sending all that stuff out because some parents want it. But actually, there's not an expectation generally that the children are sitting and working their way through all of that work, that you kind of judge it as a parent. And some children might really want to have very set times of working and then a break and then working and then lunch and then play or other activities. And other children might just need, as I was saying, that little pot where they just do a little bit of maths, and we're going to do some storytelling. And story is fantastic. So just reading stories, writing stories, telling stories to each other, telling them stories about when you were little. That's all learning. And so just being a bit more open-minded about what learning is, and noticing how difficult that is for your child. You're seeing those behaviors that we said at the beginning were showing you signs of anxiety and stress. Sort of sitting with them and going, let's think about a different way of doing this, where and have a more overview view of it, a bit of a wider view of it, so that you're thinking, okay, this week I want him or her to tell, to be able to write some kind of story, and it might be through pictures. And so over the whole week, we're just going to work on, I'm just going to tell them stories as we walk the dog, and we're going to think of a little character, or we're going to design a little character, but just do it much more open rather than lots of little different worksheety type activities. I think with technology does offer us a lot of great ways into learning. So there'll be all sorts out there that your schools are sending to you. And I was talking about BBC Bite Size earlier, and horrible histories, and all of those things are great for children. As I said, I think if you've got a child who is who's playing computer games 24/7, then yes, that's an issue. And you would want, and there is research out there that is, there's a lot of research out there, but there isn't definitive research out there that shows us the poor effects of being on screens on our children's mental health. So there's a lot of anecdotal stuff, and and I see, and I'm sure many of your parents will see, the reaction that our children have if they've spent too long on computers, and the struggle that you might have to get them off computers. And we are seeing a rise of anxiety in schools beyond this pandemic, which, and with social media and all of that, we are seeing issues which seem to link to screen time. So with older children, I would have that conversation with them about how long they're spending and what they're not doing while they're spending time on there. So just getting them off the screen with no alternative is unhelpful. So thinking about the sorts of things you want them to do in the day, and that they could do within the day, and then they organize their day, make their own timetable. Some of that will be screen time. My guess is they are spending more time on screen and maybe you might have to allow a little bit more time on screen than you would normally, because I do think these are unusual times. And being interested in what they're doing and letting them show you, and there has to be a little bit of trust in here, because if it just becomes a battleground about how much time children are spending on screens, that is not going to help them mentally. So it's kind of judging it, looking at how long they're spending overall, having a discussion with them, and always kind of going back to them saying, it's not really working, is it? I wonder how we can, rather than which ultimately is not going to help.
Thank you. So when you say that perhaps we should be a little more lenient with them in terms of the amount of screen time versus in normal situations, are there recommendations? I mean, please God, we'll leave this crisis soon, but are there recommendations for how long we should be allowing our children? Should we be limiting? Are we not doing the right thing as parents if we're not disciplining our children with the amount of time they spend on their screens?
Yeah, I mean, I it's not allowing them carte blanche just to be on screens. There's certainly with little ones, with very little ones. I mean, small children, there's research to say that they shouldn't be on screens at all until they're about 2. And then after that, you wouldn't want more than sort of an hour or 2 hours a day. However, I am aware that people working from home, particularly if you're on your own, are finding it almost impossible to get anything done without sometimes going, oh, here's a film and Frozen's on, and and actually being a bit forgiving of yourself around that, I think, is also important for our own mental health as much as it's not gonna damage them for life if they sit and watch Frozen for a morning, So I guess what I'm saying in terms of leniency is being a bit forgiving of yourself and recognizing that you might not hold the line in the way that you would normally hold the line. However, yes, little ones, they shouldn't really be on screens until about 2. Ideally, no screens at all until they're about 5 or 6, but I didn't recognize that's slightly unrealistic. And then as children get older, interestingly, they did some research recently that said that the average amount of time that our young people, so sort of from about the age of 7, 8 into teenage years, are spending is sort of 6 to 8 hours a day on screens, and that can be just not even, additional to, or as well as. So sometimes you've got a child watching telly and they've got their phone there as well, and they're also, on Instagram, and you've got double screens, triple screens, and all of that. So I think it with older children saying to them, what do you think is a fair amount? Because we want to limit the amount of time you spend on there, but we are aware that you might need a bit more than we would normally put in. And I would say, certainly with tweens, that kind of age, I think once you get into adulthood, you haven't got the control. They're adults, it's very difficult. You can have those discussions and negotiate, but with tweens, I think you wouldn't want any more than sort of 3 or 4 hours if some of that was learning time and they were using it for accessing bite size and that kind of thing, and allowing, as a family, let's use it for Zoom and let's talk to granny and granddad, and that's sort of slightly different. That's social time, and I think that shouldn't be sort of counted in the same way. So yeah, of course, not just letting them off they go and do what they like. I do think when I'm talking about no discipline, it's not about you're still holding boundaries, because actually that's certainty and that makes it safe for children. So it's saying, that isn't okay. I recognize you're upset, but it's not okay to, slam a door or push your brother. We don't do that in our house, and there's a consequence to that. But I would think certainty rather than severity in terms of punishment, if you like. So the certainty is that certainty rather than severity. So certainty is that you can't ground them anymore. We're grounded anyway. But so you might take something away, but if you take it away for 5 minutes, that can be the certainty of that, or you take it away for an hour, the certainty of that is just as powerful as the and actually a bit more realistic than, right, you're not going on your screen for a week. Just be realistic about what you can do, but you're still in charge and you're holding boundaries. That's still really important.
Right. Are you concerned at all about long-term effects of the lockdown, PTSD? I mean, children seem to be pretty resilient, but what should we be on the lookout for going forward, and what are the long-term effects on society?
Wow, that's a big question. I mean, we're all in this. We don't know quite how it's going to pan out, and for some families, I think, honestly, I am concerned about how it's going to be for some of the people. I work in schools in some really troubled families and some really troubled areas, and I am hugely concerned about the impact it will have on those children. I think generally, if we don't know how long this is going to go on for, but if you can provide a safe enough and good enough structure during this time, and when we do know what's going to happen, you can prepare your child for going outside again, and always keeping communication open, being keeping that invisible string between the two of you, noticing their feelings, recognizing their feelings, then I do think they're resilient, and I think they will be okay. Of course there will be some children who and some families and of course there may be bereavements too, so everybody's different, but I think as long I know a psychotherapist friend of mine was chatting to me the other day, and we were talking about mental health and all the rest of it, and she was saying The one thing I wish I'd known when my kids were really little, was the power of listening, the power of communication and the power of listening. And I think, we try our best to be wonderful, perfect parents, as you were saying before, and we get them doing lots of different activities, but just sometimes snuggling up on the sofa and saying, "Well, tell me what you've done. Yeah, tell me what you've learned today. Tell me what you're looking forward to tomorrow." And they start to talk, and you just go, "Oh, yeah, that sounds amazing." Yeah, and you're just listening, and you're noticing, and you're helping them tell their story. And if you can keep that going, and keep that as the priority, communication with all ages, then I think that's the baseline of any strong, sort of mentally resilient child. So we can't get, there's no guarantees, is there? But I think ultimately most of our children will be fine. My guess is, if you're signing into this because you're worried about your children will be fine. The parents who never do that you want to talk to. So yeah, it's trying to keep as much normality, as much certainty, as much communication, and putting some fun in. If at the end of the day you have not had a laugh with your kids, then think about, what do I need to do tomorrow? Dancing around the kitchen, telling a few jokes, having a bit of fun. They will remember it as a positive experience, I think, if that's what you can sort of put in.
Well, thank you. Chris, this has been such an informative and helpful discussion this evening. We've all walked away with tips and guidance that will carry us through this storm, and we're so grateful to you. I want to thank you for your time and expertise, and I also want to take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this important event. Thank you to Zoe Sinclair. Thank you to Carolyn Bogush. They're really the ones who have worked with you on this program and tailor-made it for our synagogue, for our community. So thank you to both of you. And thank you to Edward, who is in our studio in the background, who has put all of this together from the technological side. And thank you to the Norris Lee community for tuning in this evening and being part of this initiative. And we hope to bring you more initiatives in this series and in other series as well. Wishing everyone, may you stay healthy and safe. Of course, this evening is Yom HaZikaron. It's the time that we remember the fallen soldiers of the state of Israel. So it's a solemn time. We move into tomorrow evening, Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Day of Independence. We will join United Synagogue and Mizrahi tomorrow evening for that transition for both Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. And once again, thank you, Christine, and thank you all for joining us this evening. Have a good night.
Thank you.